Hey guys, Bud Elliott here. Welcome back again to the Cover 3 podcast. This is my summer school series. Not the normal background today. We're actually doing this from Elite 11 check in, where you have a ton of top quarterbacks playing, including one. Came through here a couple years ago, Talia Tagovailoa, who plays for Maryland. And hey, we're talking Maryland today. Look at that. It's Jeff Erman, inside Maryland sports, the foremost expert on the turf. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, bud. Glad to be with you.
Absolutely. You guys run a great site and a lively board. If you're a Maryland fan, definitely need to check it out. And another strong year for Maryland. Mike Locksley seems to have kind of found his footing there with the Terps, top 30 level in the power ratings, offense, kind of top 55, top 50ish, depending on where you look. Defense, very strong, much stronger than I had projected him to be on the season. I guess we'll start with the offense. Talia Tagovailoa is back. Where can he improve his game? Because last year his numbers were quite strong.
Yeah, I think there's two things. First, consistency. He when he's good, he is one of the best in the Big Ten. But there are spells where he struggles. He starts to get trapped inside of his own head. You can see the kind of the mental warfare taking place there to get his confidence back. It happened last year in back-to-back games. Really ugly losses against Penn State and Wisconsin. So that's one thing. The other thing would be the deep ball. 2 years ago he put up huge numbers. Last year, the deep ball, even with a really highly regarded receiver group, was it was probably 30% of what he'd gotten the previous year. So that I think is the biggest thing Mike Locksley wants to see. I think he feels like Josh Gaddis, his new offensive coordinator, will be more of like an extension of himself in terms of the play calling than Dan Enos was. So that should lead to more of those kinds of plays. But those would be the two biggest things for him to really be in that top tier of quarterbacks.
Makes a lot of sense. That they had a back last year who I loved playing in daily fantasy all the time, and Roman Hemby, a guy who rushing yards don't necessarily stand out, amazing passing, receiving yards not necessarily, but when you combine them, the guy was kind of a multi-purpose monster. He's back. Would you expect him to kind of be the starter again this year, or are there other guys who are fighting for that spot?
I think he'll be the starter just because it's really hard to unsee the guy. He was a few yards short of being the second 1,000-yard rusher as a freshman in Maryland history. So he had a great season, as you said, put up really good numbers. So I think he'll keep the starting job, but they do have a lot of talent there. They really love a kid named Ramon Brown, second-year player. He was a four-star recruit from Virginia, who they flipped from Virginia Tech the previous year. They think he is he's bigger, maybe a little more wiggle, just he's a stud athlete. So he'll give him some competition. I think Hemby will be the guy, but I think, people who don't follow recruiting closely and don't know about those kind of guys will probably be surprised with Ramon Brown.
Absolutely. Receiver did take some major losses and some big names gone. Jarrett, Demas, Copeland, Dupree went to Alabama via the transfer portal, but they also attacked the transfer portal pretty aggressively. They brought in three guys. What's the status of this room? Is it like a little bit of a downgrade? Is it a big downgrade? Am I misreading this? Is there a chance it's actually better?
Yeah, I think it's going to be better, for all the hype of last year's with Rakim Jarrett, Dante Demas, Jacob Copeland, who had been Florida's leading receiver the previous year. All those guys, there was a lot of hype. Some people had them ranked as a top, 10 receiver core in the country, and they didn't really produce. I think this year is going to be the opposite. It's guys who aren't necessarily as hyped, who should, if all works out well, should produce at a higher level. They brought in Cam Prather from West Virginia. I think he was the number 37 transfer in the country, 6'4" kid, playmaker from Maryland, former four-star. And then Tyrese Chambers from FIU 2 years ago. He was second in the country, or led the country, with 24 yards per catch, went over 1,000 yards. So he's another playmaker. And then they have several four-star guys, young guys who were waiting their turn last year. Octavian Smith is an extremely slippery return man and receiver, four-star a year ago, who they'd flipped from Northwestern. And then Shalik Knox is another four-star from a year ago, who they scooped out of North Carolina, physical, big play guy. So these guys aren't the household names that Demas and Jarrett and those guys were, but I think they should be better.
See, that's one of the reasons why I love doing this show, right? Is we learn stuff here at summer school. I just spreadsheet scouting it. I don't know. That's a lot of names to lose, but that's encouraging to hear that they have some really good guys in the pipeline there. Now, offensive line, they do lose 6 of their top 7 by snap count, which that's not the worst we've seen on this show, but it's darn close. They brought in 3 transfers. Is this like, if I'm circling problem areas, this is the one they it looks questionable to me.
Huge red, thick marker. That would be the area. I mean, they lost all those guys. 2 of them got drafted, and then 2 more who were expected to start. Mason Lunsford, a guard, transferred to LSU. Colton Deary, who they really liked, a center, second-year guy, also left. He's a TCU. So now you bring in these transfers. You're hoping they pan out. One of them, this kid Gottlieb Eisday, a local kid who went to Frostburg State, small school in Western Maryland, and was actually on the NFL radar, probably would have been drafted this year. So they like him a lot at one tackle spot. They have a kid named DJ Glaze at the other tackle spot, who was actually their highest rated offensive lineman, according to Pro Football Focus. But otherwise, you're relying on some young guys who haven't proven themselves and several more transfers to be reliable Big Ten linemen. And that's that could be a tenuous situation to be in.
Jeff, question for you here. They seem to have really attacked FCS and I think even D2 in the transfer portal. Is there a company they've contracted with who really scouts that area well, or like, do they have a guy on their staff who is a former FCS or D2 guy? Because it strikes me that some schools have tried to exploit this as a bit of a market inefficiency, if you will, right? Really dipping down. Oklahoma State, for instance, took a lot of guys from the FCS and D2. What's Maryland's impetus there for doing that?
Yeah, that's a good observation, but I don't think it's been a matter of contracting or anybody. I think Mike Locksley is just really good at finding hidden gems. He's done it many times over the years. You have the Stephon Diggs and guys like that, but a lot of the other guys that they've produced have been 3-star. You look at the draft this year. Deonte Banks, one of the top corners, went in the first round. Didn't have any other Power 5 offers coming out of high school, so he knows how to find guys. And they actually have another one who I didn't mention named Donnell Brown from St. Francis in Pennsylvania, another FCS guy who who was an FCS All-American last year. Who the early buzz is that he's going to be a impactful pass rusher for them. So you're right; they have worked that lower level transfer portal.
So defensively, I thought this unit was much better than I thought they would be last year. They'd lost a lot off the prior year's team, and got some guys that on paper seemed like impact guys, and were able to fill it pretty well. This year up front, they have heavy losses again. All 5 players who are more than 275 pounds who took 225 snaps. So basically, all their big guys who have their hand in the dirt, who took 200 quarter snaps, are gone. But they take 3 transfers here. Like, can they stem the tide and be okay?
Right after the offensive line circle, the defensive line would be the next concern. Everything else looks fairly solid. They lost, like you said, some big guys. They were supposed to have one of them back, Mosiah Nasili Kite. He ended up transferring to Auburn. So they did get some good guys. They have a kid named Tommy Akingbasote, a third-year guy, former 4-star, really big kid who they feel like is ready to make that move to be a guy. And then Jordan Phillips, a transfer from Tennessee, who they'd recruited really hard coming out of high school and got the boomerang transfer this offseason. They're raving about him. So there are some pieces there, but there are a lot of question marks. Maybe not quite as much as the offensive line, but there's definitely, I think the size and athleticism is still pretty good, but there's not a lot of proven commodities.
They do lose a couple key guys there at linebacker, but I feel like they always recruit this position pretty well. What are your thoughts on the linebacker group generally?
Yeah, they've got some young emerging linebackers and some veterans. Ruben Hippolyte, who's been there seemingly forever. Fanaje Gote, who I think is a 6-year guy, big hitter. So they've got experience there. And then Jay Sean Barham is a budding star. Arguably you know, he was a true freshman last year and was probably the best player on their defense. You could make an argument between him and Bo Braid, a safety who's also back. So they have him. I think he's going to be, you know, he's going to be a star clearly. And then they have a few other guys, younger guys, a kid named Kellen Wyatt, who they like a lot, Caleb Wheatland, another guy who's looked good. But I think the depth is pretty good there. There's not a proven, you know, outside of Barham, there's not a proven star, but they should be pretty good there, a linebacker.
In the secondary, safety, they look fine to me. They do lose Jacorian Bennett and Deonte Banks, if my depth chart is correct. Obviously, we talked about Banks a minute ago. The kid was a stud. So I know they've hit the portal some. Do you think they found success in the portal there in the secondary?
Yeah, they got Jaquan Shepard from Cincinnati. He was a first-team All-AAC corner, so that was desperately needed after losing two guys who got drafted, obviously, with a bunch of young guys behind them who have not been able to prove anything yet. And you have Tarheeb Still, who's a senior, very experienced, has played really well at times, had a little bit of a down year 2 years ago, but is a proven solid Big Ten corner. So those two, I think, are good. Depth-wise, that's the big question. They need one of several young guys to step up at corner. In terms of safeties, both guys are back. Dante Trader, very athletic, free safety, also plays for Maryland's lacrosse team. They like him a lot. Yeah, they think he's going to be really good. And then Bo Braid, who, if Jayshawn Barham wasn't the best player on the defense, it was clearly Braid. You know, he made a lot of big plays, a lot of tackles. So the secondary looks pretty good with the caveat that, you know, cornerback depth needs to be proven.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I in every episode I ask, like, where is the and you can't say quarterback because almost everybody will say quarterback, obviously. Where's the largest drop off between starters and backups? You know, when you're out there at practice, you're like, all right, you know, they're actually fine there with the starters. The backups just not that they can't never get ready to play, but they're just not ready to play now, and so they have to stay super healthy with starters.
Yeah, not to be redundant, but it's clearly the offensive line. I mean, at several spots, you're still trying to figure out who the starter is. So it's not like you have these, you know, world-class proven starters, but still the depth there is a huge question mark. They just took another junior college player. They took a kid from Marcus Dumerville from LSU who was a four-star, didn't play much there. So you're hoping he can at least give you some depth as a swing guy, guard, and tackle. But, you know, as you know, 5 is not enough on the offensive line, and you're just trying to get that first 5 or 6 behind them. You're really hoping that some younger guys and some transfers are going to work out.
Absolutely. I saw Marcus a pretty good bit in high school. I lived down there in Florida. You know, he was an Aquinas kid, so I could see him working out. That you could sell that to me. I'll buy some of that. If you do have some deficiencies along the lines of scrimmage, Northwestern, Nebraska, Illinois. I mean, I guess you'd want to swap Illinois for Purdue, but that's pretty much the most gift-wrapped West draw you could get. Like, you're not having to face an Iowa and block them, or, you know, block a Wisconsin or even a Minnesota. The schedule feels like, to the extent that an East schedule, you know, could set up for one, like, fairly favorably here.
Yeah, it's a little bit softer than usual. Still popping up on these top 10 hardest schedule lists, as happens literally every year. That'll change next year. You know, they got a reprieve with the elimination of divisions now, and I think that's going to give them a much better chance for success when you're not pushing that boulder up the hill of playing Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan every year. But yeah, the schedule, it's a little softer than this year. The way it lines up, they have a chance to get off to a hot start. So, you know, with everything, the momentum that they've built, this is an opportunity to take a next step.
Jeff, I really appreciate the time. Everybody needs to check out Inside Maryland Sports. Jeff does a great job, and, you know, just one of the great sites we have in our 24/7 sports family of sites, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, bud. Thanks for having me on.